The major for the Tulsa, Oklahoma Police Department denies that racial bias plays any role in policing. In fact, Travis Yates, which is his name, also suggested that they kill far less Black people than they probably should. If you don't believe me, because this statement is outrageous, you can hear it for yourselves. Here he is speaking on the Pat Campbell show.
Take the total number of people shot. 96% of people shot by cops had a weapon and were threatening that weapon. Okay, so 96%. When you take that number, it's about 24% African American, and the rest mixed races. And that's why you get this meme of blacks are shot 2 times, 2.5 times more, and everybody just goes, "Oh yeah, they're not making sense here." You have to come into contact with law enforcement for that to occur. And so when you look at law enforcement contacts, if a certain group is committing more crimes, more violent crimes, and law enforcement's having to come into more contact with them, then that number's going to be higher. And by the way, all the research says, including Roland Fryer, an African-American Harvard professor, Heather McDonald, and the National Academy of Sciences, all of their research says we're shooting African-Americans about 24% less than we probably ought to be based on the crimes being committed. And so this is Travis talking. The research is sound, but nobody's watching it. They're just looking at memes and losing their mind.
What?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, like
ought to be.
So he's arguing like, I mean, we're harassing way more Black people than white people. So based on those statistics, we should be shooting way more Black people than we shoot white people. Like, what? Because he's talking about interactions and contact with people of different races that the police department has in Tulsa.
Yeah.
First of all, your mindset shouldn't be, oh, we probably should have shot this group of people more. Your mindset should be, hey, what can we do to minimize the number of police shootings overall, right? Mm-hmm. So, like, if his argument is, we actually shoot more white people than Black people, I'm not in favor of that either. How about the cops don't brutalize anybody? How about that? Mm-hmm. But if you look at that specific police department, they do have issues with racial bias, which I'll get to in just a second, with actual details and facts and statistics, something that he failed to provide in that nonsense interview. But I mean, this is his mindset. This is his mentality. It isn't, oh, what can we do to lessen the instances of police-involved shootings? It's, oh, well, you know what? Now that I'm looking at the numbers, maybe the number of shootings for this particular race needs to be higher. Mm-hmm. Amazing.
Yeah,
it's just amazing how these people think.
Based on the what he said, some people will take away, if they're predisposed to agree with him in general, they'll be like, oh, well, he said 96% this, and he said, I'm referencing science, and it was by a Black person too. Yeah, that can be tricky stuff. When he says 96% of the people that they shoot had a gun and were threatening with that gun, maybe 96% had a gun. I'm going to say, based on my experience covering these stories, our definition of threatening with that gun is probably going to be just a little bit different. He also casually passed over who gets shot is based on who has contact with the police, but that's like the whole thing that we're talking about, is that it is set up to magnify certain types of contacts and not others. Cops are randomly pulling over people in certain neighborhoods that have certain similarities around the country and not others. They're not like snooping around Beverly Hills all day long to find some excuse to hassle people, but that does happen in certain neighborhoods. And he just ignores it because he likes the way it's set up, or he doesn't question it. He doesn't question that police resources are allocated to produce certain outcomes.
Yes.
And he demonstrated that.
Exactly. Yeah, I mean, it is kind of incredible how throughout the country, regardless of which police department you're talking about, these cops keep proving the point that the protesters are trying to make, right? I mean, they play right into it because they are who they are. They've been defending this kind of brutal activity forever, and they've gotten away with it. And I think, the story that we talked about yesterday, the head of the New York State Police Union, crying and whining about how we're being vilified. I think that anger and his rage really came from how shocked he is that for the first time, there seems to be a consensus that policing needs to change in America. And he's not used to it. They're not used to it. Now, the same defenders are still out there, right? The Tucker Carlsons, the Sean Hannitys, the Donald Trumps of the world, they still exist. But what we're now seeing on the streets through these mass protests is people of all different backgrounds coming out and saying, no, we've had enough. And we're not going to let you guys stop us or intimidate us or just make us go away. We're not going to let up until we get real change. And it enrages them. So it again blows my mind that, Travis Yates, again, the major for the Tulsa Police Department, felt comfortable saying what he just said in that interview. There's one more clip. Let's go to that.
Generation believe memes are the truth. And my kids showed me one just yesterday, and it had a list of, all these victims killed by police. Because my kid didn't. He's like, well, what about this one? I said, that's Trayvon Martin. He wasn't killed by the police. He was killed by a dude working as a community whatever, right? By the way, the same top person that they're wanting to put in cities now instead of police, dudes like that.
Right.
What about this one? Well, that's Sandra Bland. She wasn't killed by police. She committed suicide in a Texas jail. But what about this one? That's Tamir Rice. He was robbing people in a park with a fake gun, and when cops showed up, he pointed the gun at them, and they had to shoot him. So they're literally lying through. I mean, the entire world's been lied to, and what is over these years, Pat, because of this money, because of the marketing, because of the slick stuff that they've done, they've made regular Americans believe that cops are just hunting blacks down the street and killing them.
Because that's what they're doing. That's what they're doing. Tamir Rice was 12 years old. He was in a park. Tamir Rice was a 12-year-old child playing with a toy gun in a park. And a cop showed up and shot him within 2 seconds, no questions asked. There was no investigation. Cop didn't even get out of his car. He didn't even get out of his car.
No, I mean, to not mention that is madness. And man, we have seen an attempt to reinterpret or rewrite history, but to say that George Zimmerman is the model the left wants for community policing, I didn't hear a lot of that during the conversation around Trayvon Martin's murder. Wow, that is really something.
No, and he's a terrible person. He just is. He has no business having any type of power, having any type of weapon. No business working in law enforcement, that's for sure.
Hey, what if you live in that area? What are you supposed to think about the interactions you're likely to have with police if a person like him is in a position of authority, is perhaps providing advice or guidance to people coming up in the department? I would be even more worried for my life knowing that there's a person like this who not only harbors these beliefs, but is desperate to talk about them on a podcast.
So let me give you some details about Oklahoma and Tulsa specifically. Let's start off with Oklahoma and what the statistics say about policing in that state. So in 2018, for instance, the majority of people fatally shot by police in Oklahoma, 19, were white. So he is right about that. 6 people fatally shot by law enforcement were black, 4 were Native American, 3 were Hispanic, and 1 was Asian. Okay. Now, it's easy to just look at numbers. First off, I don't want any of them to get shot. I think there are ways to arrest people without just allowing cops to be the judge, jury, and executioner out on the streets. I don't believe in extrajudicial killings. Now, if there's a case where there's proof of imminent threat, that's different. But in far too many of these cases, we've seen that there is no imminent threat and the cops are quick to open fire. If your argument to me is, no, everything's okay because they actually shoot more white people than black people, I think that's a stupid argument because I don't want them to freely shoot whoever they want, regardless of race. But of course, we know that there is a racial bias because what you need to look at is how these shootings impact communities per capita. Because clearly there isn't equality in the number of black people and white people in Tulsa or Oklahoma or any part of this country. Black people clearly account for a smaller percentage of the population. So here's what we know when you look at per capita rates. While most of those killed by police were white, black Oklahomans were the most likely to be killed in a shooting on a per capita basis, white people in Oklahoma were killed by police at a rate of 1 out of every 154,195 citizens, while black people in Oklahoma were killed at a rate of 1 out of every 51,260. Yeah. So you kind of get the idea there, right? Like, when you look at the rates per capita, it obviously impacts black people more. And then when you look at Tulsa specifically, they've had all sorts of issues within their police department. So for instance, back in 2011, 4 of their officers were convicted of stealing money from crime scenes and also planting drugs on others. As a result of these actions, dozens of convictions had to be thrown out. And then their ringleader, his name was Corporal Harold R. Wells, was sentenced to 10 years in confinement, but in 2012, he was offered immunity if he testified about what else went on. And because of his testimony, additional arrests had to be tossed out because they had been tainted through the police planting evidence and doing all sorts of shady things. Tulsa is also heavily segregated. And Human Rights Watch found that Tulsa police more frequently stop drivers in areas that tend to be poorer and with predominantly black populations than the rest of the city. So for this guy to pretend as if like, oh, no, cops don't have a racial bias at all is ridiculous. And then what's even more ridiculous is that he tries to justify police shootings by saying, no, it's okay, we actually shoot more white people. Again, how about don't shoot anybody? How about find ways to de-escalate the situation and only use lethal force when someone is really an imminent threat? That's what the thinking should be. But of course it's not.
Thanks for watching The Young Turks. Really appreciate it. Another way to show support is through YouTube memberships. You'll get to interact with us more. There's live chat emojis, badges. You've got emojis of me, Anna, John, JR. So those are super fun. But you also get playback of our exclusive member-only shows and specials right after they air. So all of that, all you gotta do is click that join button right underneath the video. Thank you.